Climb every mountain. The Synod's lackeys have called on us to throw you out. The obvious contempt in Minias's voice made clear what she thought of the idea, but he pretended to take it seriously just in case. I will be gone by the morning, as always, he replied evenly. You'll do no such thing, she exploded. Then I'll be damned if I let some bloody synod tell me what to do. Herminius has made his decision. Now let him enforce it. Severus smiled sadly at the woman's anger. It was good to see his old student's passions roused, but poise demanded that she kept them mastered. How can I be an itinerant scholar, Minias, if I don't have an itinerary? Will you make me your prisoner? The jibe was gentle but firm. It would be all too easy to stay, but they both knew it would be a mistake. Don't be ridiculous. Of course you're not. But I want you to stay. You're safe here. Even as she said it, she knew the words were a lie. Nowhere is safe anymore. Our enemies will see to that. I can't stay in one place too long. Even now, my presence here is a danger. Minias looked around as if expecting to see silent bell assassins in the training room with them, but of course, they were alone. She sighed as she turned back to face her old teacher, feeling her anger turn to sadness that he was right and would soon have to depart. Why do they hate us so much? She whispered. Severus smiled again, but kindly this time. He placed his hand on her shoulder, light as a feather. Tolerance is the crack in the foundation of a strong society, he whispered back. They hate us because we represent a truth they cannot accept. That virtue comes from within, not from without. We deny their authority, and that makes us a threat to them. They are right to act. We are not like them. We will never kneel to their synod. We will never accept their mandates. If they tolerate us, their society will crack. The only way they can follow the teachings of Suleiman is to deny them. The only way they can embrace Suleiman is to kill those who revere her. Minias stared at the old sword scholar. That's all well and good, but they're trying to kill you. I don't understand why you're not seething about it. Severus of the blinding stun stared down at her, surprised by such an obvious error from his former pupil. His hand dropped to the comforting hilt of the blade strapped to his side. Poise, was all he said, as he turned to go. Overview. More than 2 years ago, the tradition of the sword scholars in Urizen was sundered by Herminius and Clytemnestra of the House of the Wanderer and other leaders of the movement at Anvil. Those who clung to the antiquated views of Suleiman, that the influence of the synod must be resisted at every turn and were not afraid to use violence to achieve their goals, were cast out by those who had long since made their peace with the Empire. Those who laid claim to the title of sword scholar have prospered in the intervening time. Herminius is senator for his home of Zenith. Clytemnestra now commands the Argent Sword. Aspar is now the conscience of the Senate. Elagabala now guides the Sevenfold Path. In the wider empire, people are more skeptical of the synod than ever before. Its power has tangibly been diminished by the success of the sword scholars. It's easy to argue that it was only when they set their blades down that the sword scholars achieved victory. To many at Anvil, those who were cast out appear to have all but disappeared. Calling themselves the disciples of Suleiman, they apparently retreated into the mountains of Zenith. A few vowed revenge on the rest of the sword scholars, claiming that the leaders at Anvil had betrayed Suleiman's teachings. Most cut a more sorry figure, withdrawing to the shadows more in sadness for their obvious loss than in anger at others. Since then, they have been a silent presence in Urizen. Confined to the highest peaks of Oporus and Moro, Anclipion and Procerus in Zenith, they dwell in spires sympathetic to their philosophies who are willing, at least, to give them safe harbour. Things may seem quiet, but the disciples are in hiding. They haven't gone away. They are still teaching the blade to those who seek them out, still preaching their blasphemous creeds to those who take them in. It is often quiet before a storm. Mercy is weakness. Herminius' words are supported by many who are keen to see the threat of the disciples of Suleiman permanently ended. Their words do not move the Urizeni with whom the disciples are sheltering. Herminius' words, supported by a greater majority of the Urizen assembly, have echoed round the mountains of Urizen, amplified by the flickering lights of the Heliopticon, shattering the quiet détente that had sheltered the disciples of Suleiman. The call to turn out the cowards that hide from the light of reason is welcomed by those who have always rejected the followers of Suleiman. Those spires that have always supported the Sentinels and the belief that Urizen is strengthened by being a part of the Empire are eager to drive out the last remnants of their ancient enemies. The problem is that is not where the sword scholars are to be found. They're not training with the Sentinels in their citadels, or sheltering in spires that believe strongly in the Empire. They're in heterodox temples in Zenith that have long questioned the authority of the Synod. They're in rebellious citadels in Sinian, where people blame the Empire for the theft of the territory by the League. They're in the iconoclastic spires in Operos, where followers of Abraxas have long searched for ways to breach the walls of the labyrinth. It could be argued that the success of the sword scholars at Anvil in weakening the influence of the Imperial Synod has strengthened the hand of those who would see it torn down. The sword scholars encourage the Urizeni and the Empire to question everything, and that makes it harder for anyone to speak with moral authority. But ultimately, the real reason that a call from the Synod to turn them out cannot succeed is because the disciples are sheltering in the spires most likely to reject the authority of the Synod. That need not be the end of the matter, however. If the spires where they are hiding will not turn them out, Urizen could drive them out. Do not question, only cut. The Urizeni Assembly could pass a mandate urging citizens to hunt down and kill the remaining disciples. It would be illegal for people to follow this mandate. The disciples of Suleiman are sheltering with those spires least inclined to accept this leadership of the Synod and the Empire. Itinerant scholars like Severus of the Blinding Sun wander from one spire to another, selling their skills as a teacher with the blade and offering advice and guidance, but they're generally shrewd enough to go where they are welcome. If Urizen wants to turn them out, they will have to gather in force and drive them out. Mandate. Mercy is weakness. Mercy shows the enemy your limits. We send named priests with 50 doses of Liao to urge all loyal Urizeni to hunt down the disciples of Suleiman and show them the blade. Find your enemy's limits and go beyond them. Synod Mandate, Urizen Assembly. If this mandate is enacted, it will create a unique raiding venture for Urizeni military units to drive out the disciples for the season following the autumn equinox. Military units that take this action will engage in lightning attacks on the traitorous spires, citadels and temples, looking to draw out the disciples of Suleiman, engage them in battle and kill them. Some will wring their hands at the thought of Urizeni killing Urizeni, but it will receive broad support from many sentinels whose feud with the followers of Suleiman is legendary. It is not the first time in Urizen's history that force of arms has been brought to bear against the sword scholars after all. Each standard military unit assigned to drive out the disciples' action adds 100 points towards successful resolution of the opportunity. Each additional rank for an upgraded or enchanted military unit adds another 20 points. Rituals and other effects that increase the ranks of raiding military unit, such as Merciless Wrath of the Reaver, increase the effective strength for the purposes of this special action. If support for the action achieves a combined military strength of at least 2,000, then it will force the disciples onto the back foot. Dozens of them will be killed, and they will be faced with being driven out or wiped out if they do not find some way to respond. They don't have the military strength to fight back directly, but they won't go willingly into the labyrinth. The biggest problem with this approach is that it would be blatantly illegal. It would be carried out in full public view of the magistrates, who would quickly compile a list of everyone who committed their military unit to this course of action. They would then face the full force of the law next time they encountered a magistrate. However, the law does provide a way to avoid such chaos. Strength against weakness. The Imperial Senate could criminalize membership of the Disciples of Suleiman. Such an action would make it legal for the Urzeni to hunt them down. The disciples are those who formed the hardcore supporters of the original teachings of Suleiman. 2 years ago, the Synod came within a hair's breadth of excommunicating one of their group's figureheads, Severus of the Blinding Sun, despite the fact that nobody who attends Anvil has ever met them. An extraordinary feat that demonstrates the depth of feeling the disciples inflame and the crimes that they have committed. They have never accepted the way, and there is no meaningful sense in which that they can be said to accept the authority of the Empire. Some still do follow the virtues. Courage, ambition, and wisdom have always been popular amongst those who look to Suleiman's example. Many, like Severus of the Blinding Sun, also adhere to other, darker powers. It is not hard to argue that they represent a clear threat to the Empire and that their fraternity should be criminalized, just as the Viig and the Hand of Duman were. It would require a Senate motion to declare it illegal to be a member of the Disciples of Suleiman and to order the arrest and trial of suspected members. It wouldn't change the need for Urzeni military units to attack those spies that were harboring the disciples, but instead of clandestine raids, any Urzeni who pledged their military unit to the cause would be led by magistrates looking to arrest them. The outcome would be the same. There is no possible way that the disciples will cooperate with the magistrates, and they will go down fighting. But it would at least ensure that everything that was done legally. Normally, such actions are costly. The magistrates must recruit militia and pay them to help enforce the law. In this case, there would be no cost to the Senate. There aren't enough sellswords in Urizen to enable the magistrates to carry out the action without the help of loyal Urzeni citadels and spires, so the success or failure of the action would only depend on the military strength committed to the venture.